if you're alive, you may have seen the headlines about DEI.
From government policies to how companies are responding to even how it is affecting employees.
But we're going to specifically focus in on that last bit and talk about what this means for you and what actually makes a great team.
Let's get into it. Kayla, let's break down the DEI headlines we just alluded to in the intro. I feel like I'm on like NPR.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a quick rundown because
we're pivoting to news.
We're pivoting. The numbers came back. They weren't good. We need to pivot to news. It's the new pivot to video. Let me break down what's been in the news around DEI. It's been everywhere for the past maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So Costco, and I'm going to focus on companies and how they're responding to it. So Costco, there's 2 things they're not giving up. Hot dogs and inclusion efforts, okay? They are still very committed. They actually had a shareholder vote, and they all for a proposal that was going to take away their DEI efforts. 98% of their shareholders voted against it. And they even said, quote, "Our commitment to inclusion does not and has never included quotas, systematic preferences, nor does it mean compromising merit." They're saying, like, we're just building an effective pipeline of talent for our organization. We're still hiring the best people, and our customers and our employees come from very different backgrounds, and we want them to feel included. JP Morgan also doubling down. Jamie Dimon, quote, "Bring them on," when talking about efforts to roll back DEI. They have made some changes to their policies based on the U.S. Supreme Court case about affirmative action, which I believe was last year, just to make sure they're in legal compliance, but they're still very dedicated. Much the same reason as Costco is. They have employees from all over. They serve communities all over. They want them to feel included. The NFL, which, you know, kind of surprised me, but it does make sense. Roger Goodell said that DEI efforts have been positive for the league, and they reflect the makeup of our fan base and our players. And this is what I thought was really important about what they said. Roger Goodell said, quote, "We got into diversity efforts because we thought it was the right thing to do for the NFL." And so I think a lot of times we're expecting maybe companies to think about what's best for society. I don't think they're doing that. I think they're thinking about what's best for them. And in some cases, I would say in most cases, as we'll get into later, this is actually a great policy for these companies. The NFL has players from all over, has fans from all over. They want to make sure everyone feels like this is a game for them. There have been some companies, though, that have maybe gone in the other direction or rolled back some of their DEI efforts. To highlight a few, just to give people a broad sense of what's going on in this space, Target, which used to be was winning awards for their DEI efforts, they sent out a memo saying they're going to end their 3-year DEI goals, and they're ending a program focused on carrying more products from Black or minority-owned businesses. Google said they, quote, "will no longer have aspirational goals," which out of context just sounds hilarious. They're just we're giving up. We're not thinking to the future. We're good right now as is. But they were talking about like aspirational goals in terms of how many people they wanted to hire from certain backgrounds. And they did, however, say they're going to maintain their ERG groups. And then the last one, McDonald's, they had this diversity commitment around suppliers where they got their different products from. They're ending that or phasing that out. And they're renaming their diversity team to the inclusion team. Big pivot there. Yep. I'll end like all of these. I don't think it's like one company 100% doubled down, one company 100% rolled back. They're all very nuanced. So I would go and look at the actual statements. There's things that people changed from a legal perspective. There's things that people maybe changed for fear of a lawsuit or something like that. But in general, I would say some companies are leaning in and some companies are leaning out. So that's the rundown of what's been in the news lately.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great.
That was a pretty good NPR impression.
That was pretty good.
Okay, thank you.
And despite the joke that we made earlier, we are not pivoting to news. We are not reporters. If you are looking for deeper, more in-depth research about this, which you should because it's important, check out HR Brew. We actually spoke with Kristen Parisi, who is a reporter on HR Brew, to kind of give us some additional context about what's going on and the implications of these decisions that companies are making. Highly, highly encourage you. You can go to hrbrew.com to look into some of those that reporting. That'll talk about the legal implications stuff that we are not qualified to comment on.
Yeah, we are not lawyers.
I don't think you knew this.
Nor do we even play one on TV. Yeah. That's how far I applied to law school.
Did you?
Yeah. That's as far as I got.
That's funny.
Yeah, no comment on if they accepted me or
Great.
Yes.
So we're not experts in this by any means, but we do think it's important to talk about. And one of the reasons why we are talking about this today is because we actually got a really great in-depth listener email. And I think we would like to highlight it.
Yeah, and one thing before that, I think why we're talking about this, exactly what you said, but I was thinking of like, okay, how does this affect like per my last email, like our framework?
Yeah.
Like, and I said like, as goes the world, so goes the workplace. Mm-hmm. And things that happen at a high level, like we're not here to like fix that. Obviously, we have 2 microphones and we're idiots, but it does affect.
Speak for yourself, actually.
It does affect like how employees show up and how workplaces run. And so we thought it was a really important topic to cover.
The as goes the world, so goes the workplace. The Tao of Kyle. I love that for you.
I had to work it in. So yes, let's pull up the email we got because that was a great call out. Made us think about this a little more deeply. Hello, Kaila and Kyle. While I don't like to act political in the workplace because of recent events regarding DEI, I'm a little scared about my future career. I was born with a disability and I also identify as non-binary and am part of the LGBT+ community. I currently work as a QA analyst remotely and am grateful that the company I work for has been very accommodating and supportive of my needs. This is the career I want to grow in. But with the new policies being put in place by the government, I'm worried that my job is in jeopardy, even though I'm great at my job. I can't help but feel helpless when in today's climate, anything can happen. And finding a job like this was hard to come by, as my last couple of employers weren't as accommodating. So my question is, how should I navigate this? Sincerely, R. That was not their actual name. We have anonymized it. Kind of feels like Pretty Little Liars, A writing in. But a really thoughtful email. And I think, again, it just shows that what happens at a very high level does creep down and affect you as an individual, affect you as an employer, affect you as an employee. So really important to cover. Reactions to R's email.
Yeah, the first thing that I would like to say is that it sounds like you're doing great.
You literally flex.
Like you said, you're doing great. You said you like this career. This is a company that has been accommodating for your needs as an individual with a disability. I think like the hopeful-ish thing is like the people that work at your company have not changed overnight. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing a great job and you know that your company is supportive, I think it's completely understandable to be concerned. Mm-hmm. And I understand that concern, but it sounds like you're probably going to be okay in the short term.
Yeah, it's hard because there's a part of that email where R said, I feel helpless. And I think that is a easy thing to understand when some of these headlines can be, particularly if you're from one of these communities, like very scary to you. And I think it's hard to like compartmentalize, like this is happening at a societal level and my workplace has actually been very accommodating. Like you still are like a little confused. That's why I do think your advice, like go read HR Brew or like other legal coverage, compliance coverage, what's happening at a higher level. Like go do that. I think it'll give you the context you need to feel at least up to date. But to R's point, like you're crushing your job. Mm-hmm. Your company has been accommodating since they've hired you. I don't think that is going to change without knowing your specific circumstance. And at the end of the day, even I think everyone agrees on like we want the best people, and it seems like you're crushing it. So I don't think you have anything to worry about at your specific workplace level, which hopefully is a little reassuring.
Yes, and I think the important thing about R's message is that I think this is something that's being felt by a lot of people. Yeah. And potentially people that don't have maybe such a solid foundation at their jobs or don't feel as supported at work. This can absolutely be very scary. And so we've spent the past few weeks kind of thinking about this a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think I'll go through kind of like my thought process. Yeah. Because I've gone through a variety of different pieces of advice that I'm kind of like embarrassed about. So I want to talk about it.
And I want to hear those and write them down.
and embarrass me publicly. No, but I think that for me and for us, what we focus on a lot on Per My Last Email is things that are within your control. And this is decidedly something that is not within your control. It is on the government level, and we are not like policy experts or anything like. So I was like, how do I give our advice about putting things into their own control and like doing things that they can, that they like can
Action
own,
and
independent. And so my first reaction here as like advice was like, just be the best. Just work hard and you'll be fine. And like, as soon as we were talking about this in prep and like, as soon as I said it, I was like, oh, that's the stupidest thing I've ever said. Like,
why do you think that?
Because of course, like, yeah, that's like the advice, but that's not reality. That's not like how the world operates. You could be the best at something and still experience bias.
Yeah.
And still not get where you need to because of how you look or how you present yourself in society. And so then as soon as I said, I was like, oops, I don't agree with that actually. Reality is that biases exist, and the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives came up for a reason. And so my second follow-up piece of advice after thinking about this is there are some things that are within your control. And it's not necessarily just like be the best, just work really hard and then like everyone will love you, because that's like
Not
in bad
realistic.
faith. Yeah. But there are strength in numbers. Just because maybe your company is rolling things back, maybe your company has defunded some ERG groups, that doesn't mean that you can't engage in your community. Advocate for yourself, for others, build a community within a company. And then you can advocate for yourselves as a block. The reality is that, you still exist within a company and you can advocate for yourself, and there is strength in numbers. And so I think my true advice is, yes, a lot of this feels outside of your control, and it feels very scary potentially. And I understand that. And I think where you can feel like I'm taking action to protect myself and others is by building that strong community, maybe outside of the constraints of company policies.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, both inside your company and outside in the world, like very important to have a community, a place you feel like you truly belong. I want to pull in some research that we actually did at Morning Brew Inc. from our insights and analytics team about this particular topic, DEI, because I think it actually helps provide some scaffolding for the rest of the conversation. So we ran this survey. We asked the break room, which is like our survey group, and 54% of the break room said DEI is critical to business success. So a majority of people are actually saying DEI is not just important, it's critical to business success. So I think, again, having the understanding that most people think this is important maybe is a little reassuring. What I thought was really interesting, though, is 80%, even more than the 54, 80% believe DEI at work is performative. And I think that's a really interesting piece to dive into, because people can think this is important, but people can also think the way we're going about it isn't actually moving the needle. It's about looking good and not doing good necessarily. And what can we create that actually accomplishes the goals that I think most normal people want, which is the people you work with, you want them to feel included, you want them to feel like there's belonging, that they're being treated fairly, that there's equal opportunity for everyone. That seems like a goal that, like, you talk to an average person, they're like, yeah, that all sounds good. How do we actually create something that brings that to the forefront? So I thought that dichotomy between those two percentages was very interesting.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because first of all, it was very fun to survey the break room, and we have you're gonna hear a lot about it. We have tons of data that we're gonna sprinkle in moving forward.
Yeah, we've decided actually that having data might help.
Who knew?
Might help the show.
Vibes based.
Yeah, I am going to miss making up things. So.
We have not made up things, for the record. Sponsors, don't worry. No, but I do love this, because this was also my initial reaction. Is a lot of these DEI programs, it felt like came on in 2020, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement. And a lot of it felt very similar to greenwashing a little bit, in that like these, companies that are saying, oh, we're doing stuff for the environment, but actually really aren't. They're just using that to boost their numbers. It kind of felt like that. It felt a little disingenuous, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think that I find myself reflected in that 80%. I also think that it's important, and so there are ways that companies can enact policies that feel real and not performative. I just don't know that these companies that are rolling them back were the ones that were really enacting change. And like, I asked Kristen this question and I was like, is this legit? Like, it feels like the people that were performative or the companies that were performatively being pro DEI are now performatively rolling them back. She said yes and no.
Yeah.
Some of these companies have had DEI policies in for decades. So I was like really hoping it was like, don't worry guys, it's fine, but it's not.
And like, I think businesses want money. That's my breaking news.
Shocking take.
So businesses want money.
Yeah.
And I do think that the landscape that businesses are operating in, the political, the societal landscape has shifted. And so I think they're going to do what they think is in the best interest of making more money. And while some, like the NFL, JP Morgan, Costco, it's still part of their calculus. You hear them say, it's not like because we think that this is going to change the world and that's good. That might be a side effect. They're rooting this in a business decision to saying like, we actually want the best talent. And in order to find the best talent, we have to have pipelines everywhere. We have a ton of different people that shop at our store. We want them to feel like this is a safe place for them, that they belong here. It's to make money. And so I think if we're expecting a corporation to be our savior on all these things, like it's probably not going to happen and you're probably going to be disappointed. So I think like for me, the best way to ensure that your company stays committed to these things that I personally think are societal goods is to make the case that they're also business goods, because that gives them lasting power, where if the political winds shift, they're still going to do them because it actually helps the bottom line.
I'm so glad you said that because I have a stat.
Okay.
So a recent McKinsey report that came out later last year stated that there's a 39% increased likelihood of outperformance for companies in the top quartile of ethnic representation versus the bottom quartile. So this is something that I think is a classic. We've talked about it in the past. Diverse voices leads to better business outcomes. And I completely agree with what you're saying. I think it's unreasonable or silly to expect a company to like act for the good of for the good of society, because we've been shown time and time again that
that's not what they do.
It's not what they do.
Yeah.
And like that's like a neutral statement, whether it's good or bad, we can have feelings about, but that's reality. But this is showing that if you have different voices in the room that have different life experiences and walk through the worlds differently, you're going to have better business outcomes. And I think the most obvious one that we've talked about forever that is like the classic is the 2017 Pepsi ad where Kendall Jenner solves racial tension by handing a cup of Pepsi or whatever
she solved racism with a soda. It ended in 2017.
Yeah. We've actually, I don't even know what we're talking about because it's been solved. So that kind of caused a big discussion about what it means to have diverse voices in decision-making positions, because nobody would have approved this, right? If they like thought about it for a second. And so I guarantee you that regardless of what government policies are or where the political winds are, Pepsi has a diverse marketing team. Like, I don't know that for sure, but I feel really confident because they haven't messed up that badly again. Like, it's just good business. It's the same as, building products that address real people's needs, and making things that make sense. In order to do that, you need to have those people represented in your business. Yeah. So I do feel kind of not necessarily hopeful, but I do feel like this is the right business decision. And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show.
And to maybe add to this hope, what we saw in this study that I was referencing earlier of the break room, younger cohorts generally are much more pro like inclusion than older cohorts, and not to like just shit on older people.
And they're dying, so sorry.
I just think in general, like people have now grown up in a world that is in general like more diverse, and people then are like, oh yeah, like this is normal, this is cool, we should keep this going. So I do think, fingers crossed, like the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Like as we grow, like it goes up and down, but we tend to get better, hopefully. So that maybe is a slightly hopeful note. I think the other thing is there's like I think this like language game that goes on where if I say DEI, it might mean something entirely different to me than it means to you, than it means to someone else. It's the same thing with like woke. That word, like literally, what does that even mean anymore? It's like an obfuscation of actually talking about what you're trying to get at. And so I think it's very easy to use these words. Everyone thinks something differently. It feels like this really, really, really big thing. But then I'm like, okay, we talked to Kristen about this. What are examples of like DEI efforts, like tactical, real examples at work? It's an ERG group. It's a group of people that have a similar background, a similar trait, a similar shared experience, and they want to have belonging at work and find other people that have that to like make friends, be better colleagues, and then teach the other people at work about a really cool thing.
Yeah.
Who's against that?
Yeah.
Like I literally just do not believe that an average normal person is like, you know what? The AAPI ERG like needs to go. Okay, we just had our ERG day at Morning Brew.
Yes, it was
and they did a Lunar New Year, and there was a dragon dancing around.
Yeah.
It was electric. And
It was
like
very cool.
the whole day was it's like, okay, this is awesome. I'm learning about all these different cultures or things that I wasn't aware of before. Like, this is wonderful. I now feel more connected to my colleagues. We can do better work. We feel more collaborative. Like, that is actually a really good thing. And I just think most people agree with that. We've seen it in the stats. It's when we're using these words that like people don't really agree on what they mean that I feel like we are talking past each other.
Yeah. And there are certain things that are legally required and illegal,
Yeah.
right? And that also determines what quote unquote DEI means. For example, it is illegal to discriminate against someone based on gender, age, race. It is also illegal to enact quotas in your business. So those are things that are not happening or should not be happening. And if they are, those laws haven't changed. But I do want to change gears a little bit. We've mentioned it, we've talked about it. It's good business to have diverse voices in the room and diverse decision makers. But what are the things that make a truly high performing team?
Well, so I would break this down into two things. I would say there's two ways to have a high performing team. The first is to get the best people on the team. And then the second is to enact policies in the workplace or things that bring those people together and let them perform even higher. So there's like the recruitment phase, and then there's like the let's do work together phase. From a recruitment phase, you want to hire the best people. You need to get the most amount of applications from like the largest pool of people so you can actually assess the talent of everyone possible. So I think that is one of these efforts that people tend to cite is like we're like increasing our recruitment to like HBCUs or like underrepresented colleges, or there's like the Association of Black Journalists. I know we post a lot of our jobs out there to try to, again, it's not like we are going to hire this particular journalist automatically. It's just like we want the best people. We need to put the largest net out there so we can assess talent. So the first thing I would do is like look at your recruitment pipeline. Are you getting enough applications where you feel confident that you're kind of hitting all of the different talent pools that we have across the country? So do that. The second thing then is once you have that team, every new hire, I think you have to think about how do they, are they great at their job, but are they going to be a net addition complementary to the skill sets you already have? And I think in the workplace, for some reason, this gets lost. I think a sports analogy is really easy to understand. If you have like two amazing point guards in the...
Go ahead.
You're like, actually, this analogy is not hitting.
It's lost on
Let me break this down for you, though, because I genuinely do think this is like an easy way to understand it. If you have two amazing point guards on your current NBA team, and you go to the NBA draft, and they're the best player in a vacuum is a point guard, but the second best is a center, you're going to look at your team and say, we already have the best point guard. Like, we need to bring on a center that's complementary to the skill sets we already have. So it's just understanding both individual skill and fit and complementary nature to the team as you start bringing on additional team members. So I think those two things are important to think about as you're trying to build a high-performing team. What about you?
Yeah, I really like those, like breaking it down into like pre and post employment. In terms of the pre-employment, when you're looking for somebody that is a good addition to the team, something that we spoke with Sally Krawcheck, who's the CEO of Elvest.
Yeah, she's known as the most powerful woman on Wall Street.
She's great. She's really fun to talk to. And, you know, at Morning Brew Learning, we interviewed her. One of the things she talked about is culture fit versus culture add, which is pretty much what you were saying. But the one thing that I'd like to point out is it's like really, really enticing to hire people that you'd want to have a beer with. Like, yeah, I want to have friends at work. Like that makes it so fun. And like we get to talk shit and like do stuff and hang out. And like I'm not challenged and I get to know people that I like and look like me and think like
Yeah. And like the beer thing, I think it often comes out in like, oh, they went to a similar school as me, so we'll have something in common. So it's like easier to talk to, and like that can maybe blind you to the actual ability to do the job in some ways.
Exactly. And culture fit is like that mentality is what's going to create like people that like a hive mind, basically. There's not going to be a lot of intellectual discussion because everyone's going to be thinking the same thing. They're all going to come from the same
Yeah, there won't be that creative tension. You need to like come up with new ideas, push things forward.
Exactly. And a team that has culture adds are people that are complementary but not necessarily identical. So we can get along. We could have a happy hour. We could be friends, but that's not the primary driver of the hiring. And I think that's something that you just kind of highlighted that I think is really important.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'd like to bring up is something that we have talked about so much, but it is that after the hiring, how do you create a team that is high performing?
Yeah.
It's a team that's not afraid to speak their mind, speak up, get into discussions, get into disagreements, and at the end of the day, know that they're not going to be penalized, they're not going to be fired for having disagreements. I think it's this idea of like psychological safety in the workplace, which is we're not disagreeing on like your like right to exist in the workplace. We're disagreeing about like what's the next strategic move. And there are times where, like, for example, when we were working at Morning Brew Learning, we would have these like crazy knockdown drag out fights.
Oh my God. I remember being on the top of my gym, like overlooking the Hudson River.
After like 12 hours of working.
For like a 3-hour phone call with you of like, should we have quizzes or not?
Yeah, it was should we require quizzes?
Yeah. And I thought I would never speak to you again.
I'm so intense. Like we were screaming and it was like kind of shocking. It was probably our first like really long and intense fight.
Yeah.
And again, it was like, it's a fight. It was like a literal fight.
Yeah.
But it was about work. And the next day it was like, hey, dude, what's up?
It felt good. Like, I think we both knew that, like, I respected you as a human.
Yeah.
You respected me. We also knew, like, this is just the process. We're gonna air it out. But we had psychological safety where, like, there was no fear of saying the wrong thing or, like, having an idea that was dumb that we'd be punished later. It was about, like, creative tension, going at it, still feeling like we're a team. It's going to produce the best result. And the next day, we make up, we're friends,
fine.
And then we fight again.
Exactly, every day. But I think that's something that's really, really important. And one of the difficult things about DEI sometimes is that inclusion part, is you bring people in and they have these diverse voices. You know that the diverse voices is what makes your business great. But then how do you make sure that everyone feels that they can actually express concerns, that they can actually disagree, and that they won't be penalized for that? So I think that's a really important element as well.
This is such an important element. I'm really glad you said that. And so Google did this project where they interviewed hundreds of their employees across hundreds of different business units inside of Google. And the question they were trying to answer is, what makes a great team? And they had some like hypotheses right away. It was like the number of MBAs or like how many PhDs the team have. Didn't matter. The top 5 in order of importance were psychological safety was number 1, dependability, structure, meaning, and impact. And I want to double click on the psychological safety because it goes back to R's email that we read earlier, which is psychological safety, the fear of interpersonal risk taking, that you can fail and you won't be judged. Or if you say something stupid, the rest of the team is not like out to get you and wants you gone and you're walking on needles. It's about feeling safe enough to say your crazy idea, your dumb idea, disagree with someone. How can you do that if you think that people don't even respect you as a person? That they think that you shouldn't even have rights in society? That is not going to allow you to have psychological safety. So if I'm R's business, I need to double down on saying like, we want you because you're great at your job. We would never fire you because you're X, Y, or Z. Like, we need you to show up and to feel confident and feel like you belong. And that's why we're doing all of these things, so that you can speak up and you know that we have your back, and that's how we're going to get the best ideas. So I think combining this idea of psychological safety with belonging, which is necessary to have that, we know psychological safety is the number one most important thing in teams to drive business success. So all of this stuff I think is interconnected. And I love the point you brought up, because I do think that makes a massive difference for business impact.
Yeah, I agree. So to wrap.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts? It was a big topic.
Look, I think my last thought is maybe like a personal one. And that is, I think even, prepping for this episode, admittedly, like, I was like really worried a little bit of saying something wrong or like coming off the wrong way, because this is something that's important, I believe. And it's important to other people, maybe to a degree that it isn't even important to me. Mm-hmm. And I think people have really strong feelings about this one way or the other. And so I was worried, like, I'm just going to say something so dumb, and it's going to go out to the entire world, and like, that sucks. And
all 6 billion.
Yeah, 6 billion people listen to the podcast. Sorry to do the numbers. But I think for me, like, one of the things is like, kind of like staying in the game. Like, you have to be a little vulnerable and know that, like, look, you might say something wrong. You might do something that comes off the wrong way. And like, that is okay. Mm-hmm. I think, like, as long as you're committed to long-term, like, being thoughtful about these ideas, being thoughtful about how you show up in the workplace, how you interact with your coworkers, how you make people on your team feel, like, over the long run, I think you're going to do the right thing, as long as you're just being thoughtful and like keeping this top of mind. And for people that don't think it's important, like, I'm not calling you out, calling you in, like, think about what we talked about on this episode about business success. Think about if you had to show up at work and like didn't feel like people even like cared about you, how that might affect your performance. And I just think there's a massive opportunity here for us to drive business success, which the company wants, but also just like show up for your coworkers in a way that I think is just important as a human. So I'm glad we had this conversation. I hope it's helpful for listeners.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think one of the things that I've been grappling with, just to wrap it up, is this feeling that, like, are we going backwards or were we pretending to go forwards? And like, I think that one of the things that feels a little maybe hopeful is like, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. But is this an opportunity for us to acknowledge that a lot of these actions have been performative and have not been,
or have been perceived as performative,
or even the perception of being performative is performative. Like, it's like, if it's not getting stuff done, it's not effective. Like, is this an opportunity for us to really rethink what diversity, equity, and inclusion means for companies? Can we really like rebuild from the ground up? And it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. And like, maybe this is an opportunity for us to like actually make lasting change, even though I wish maybe it wasn't like this. Again, trying to like be as hopeful as possible in like a time that's not very, but I completely agree with everything that you said here. And I think if you have big thoughts about anything that we've said, hopefully they're not super mean, but email them to us at permylastemail@morningbrew.com. You can also DM us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. We got them all. Yeah. And yeah, should we roll the credits?
Let's do it. Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Our technical director is Uchenna Ogu.
Haley Resnick is a senior analyst.
And our chief content officer is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See y'all.